Hey everyone, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2016 Jeep Wrangler, we're going to be showing you how to install the etrailer.com base plate kit with removable arms. Before we get into all that though, let's take a moment, we'll check this out and make sure it's going to be the best option for your Wrangler. Before we jump right in, I want to talk about one of the main questions that we get asked when it comes to flat towing your Jeep, and that's what parts am I going to need? There's a total of 5 main components: your base plate, your tow bar, your safety cables, your tow bar wiring, and your supplemental braking system. And with the Jeep too, I like to recommend what's called a battery charge line kit. Keeps your battery topped off when you're flat towing down the road, as well as a brake light relay. That way all of your lighting functions will work properly. This is what the front of your Jeep could look like whenever you are all hooked up behind your motorhome. And I like it, you know, it's pretty simple. Everything's nice and organized and order, and I am a fan of the bracket that comes included with the base plate. A lot of times it's the little things that make a difference, right? So the bracket gets connected to the base plate and it just gives you a good spot to mount up some of your other flat towing components. Makes it convenient because you're not going to have to worry about getting stuff separate or trying to build something to mount all this other stuff up. This is what your Jeep can look like whenever you're not hooked up and towing behind your motorhome. And compared to some of the other base plates that are available, I'd say this is probably one of the better looking ones, at least in my opinion. And I say that because really the only thing you'll be able to see is this piece here that comes out and gives you your attachment point, right? So this almost has to be visible. As opposed to some of the other ones out there where you'll see a whole bar or beam that runs across the front of it. I'm not saying that those look bad by any means. It is a Jeep, so just about anything, any accessory you put on the front that looks rugged and things like that isn't going to look out of place. But, you know, like I said, I think this just has a slight advantage over some of the other ones when it comes to those looks. As far as fitment goes, this is something you really need to pay attention to when picking out a base plate for your Jeep. And that's just because there's so many different submodels and different types of bumpers and things like that. And as far as what this particular one is going to work with, it'll work with all of them that have the standard bumper here, with a few exceptions. The Hard Rock, the Backcountry, or the 75th Anniversary Edition. It is not going to be compatible with those, but the good news is if you happen to have one of those, there are other base plates available that will work with those particular models. Whenever you are ready to hook up, it's going to be pretty straightforward. I feel like this is an important step, right? Because you're going to be doing this quite often. You'll just pull the little plugs out there, and you'll have these removable arms, and a little hole right there will line up with the small hole and the base plate. So you'll take that, rotate them, then there's a pin you put through there to lock it into position. Same deal over here on this side. Now that the arms are in, it gives us an attachment point for our tow bar, and we're able to hook up our other components too. The safety cable openings, they're relatively small, but that makes them less noticeable, and even larger size hooks will still work just fine there. And for the tow bar ends, these, you just line them up, put your pin through there, and lock it down. And one of the nice things about this style of base plate is the compatibility with a lot of different types of tow bars. So it'll work with Demco tow bars, etrailer.com tow bars, even some of the other manufacturers. A lot of the Blue Ox ones will work, Kurt ones, and even if you happen to have a completely different manufacturer that's not directly compatible, like let's say a Roadmaster tow bar, for example, and you want to use it with this base plate, chances are really good that there will be an adapter available that'll allow you to swap the ends out and allow them to pair up. When it comes down to it, it's a really good option for your Jeep as far as getting it set up to be able to flat tow. You know, it looks good, and it's a really versatile base plate. You know, the types of tow bars it can work with and things like that. And it looks good, so you really can't go wrong. as far as the installation goes, really not too bad. You pull your bumper off, put the base plate up there. You have to drill a couple of holes, but it bolts in and really don't take up a whole bunch of time. I'll say probably the most tedious part is trimming the plastic underbody panel to get that back up into position around the base plate. It's just a little time consuming, but once I did it, I will give you some measurements and stuff, and hopefully makes it easier for you having something to kind of work from there and speed things up. But with that said, if this is something you're not going to mess with, you'd rather have someone else set all this up for you, I can understand that. You can always use our dealer locator network, and that can help you find a shop in your neighborhood that can do this for you. But if you're going to give it a go, hang around, we'll go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the front of our Jeep, and we need to remove this splash shield here. So there's a handful of push pin fasteners that kind of run along the edge. And with these, you can take a trim tool like this or even a flathead screwdriver. Just pry down on the head, and then you're able to work the whole base out. We'll just work our way along here until we get all of them removed. And once those are out, there's going to be two more kind of on the back side right here in this area. Here's where this one is, one just like it on the other side. And from this point on, whatever we do to one side of our Jeep, we're going to repeat on the other side because it's set up the same. So we got this one out here, and I already removed the other one. So now the panel will drop down, and we can set it off to the side. We can unplug our fog lights now. You just release it. Just push down on that little tab there. We're doing this because the bumper's going to have to come off. It's just easier to unplug everything now as opposed to trying to hold the bumper up and get these unplugged, you know. To get the bumper off, we're going to have a total of 8 nuts. All right, so 4 on each side of our vehicle. You have these 2, and then just on the other side of the frame, there's 2 more just like it. And these are an 18 millimeter head. What I like to do with the first one is remove it and then just put it back on a few threads. That way when we get all of them off, you know, there's still a couple on here and the bumper is not just going to fall off or anything. So as far as the rest of them go, we'll just go ahead and get them all removed. So I'm just holding the bumper in place with my leg. I removed those last 2 nuts that we left on hand tight. Behind the hardware too, there's these little plates. So just make sure you hold on to these. But at this point, we should be able to just work our bumper straight off the front of our Jeep and get it out of the way for now. Just over here on our driver's side frame rail, this top right hole, it's a little bit smaller than the rest of them. We do need to enlarge that. So I got our bit here. We'll go ahead and get that done. Once that's drilled out, I did come back, just kind of clean everything up and put some fresh paint on this surface to give us a fresh start. So what we can do now, we can take our base plate, and it definitely helps if you have someone that can give you a hand with this part. And I like to have a clamp ready and maybe some sort of tool like this where you can put it through and kind of hold the base plate up. But this is going to slide into position. Rotate it in like that. Then that's why I grabbed this thing here, so I could kind of put that in and it'll stay in position while I take a clamp. Make sure everything's lined up. We'll just clamp this down, that way it'll stay in place. With the base plate clamped into position, if you look at each side of it, there's going to be a hole in the base plate. We're going to use that as a template to drill through one side of our frame. That way we can get some hardware in there. So just take it slow and that hole created. The hardware that we're going to use for these openings, that you have this nut plate, and that's going to come in behind, you know, the frame there, and this 1/2-inch bolt is going to thread into it. So on that 1/2-inch bolt, you're going to put a split lock washer and a flat washer. Before you even try this, I do suggest just taking the bolt, making sure it threads in nicely. Sometimes powder coat can get jammed up on the threads there, and so if it's real tight, you can always just take a 3/4 inch wrench and tighten it down first, just to break that powder coating free. And the hardware that we're going to use to secure the base plate is going to receive some of this blue Loctite here. Just put a little bit on the threads, and I like to take a pair of needle nose pliers and clamp it to this plate. That way you get a bigger handle to work with, because this is going to go in through this opening. Then we'll line it up. I'll get this started and tight. We can come back with a 3/4 inch socket and snug it down. Once you get the other side finished, you want to come back with a torque wrench and tighten down the hardware to the amount specified in the instructions. At this point, you can take the included safety cables and get those installed. Really nothing to them. I just wrap it around the base plate, and then come up, wrap it around your frame, and I just connect them with the D-link that they give you. And something that I like to do is just come back with some big zip ties and kind of zip tie everything up, just so it stays secure and it's not going to clunk around or anything like that. The base plate does come included with this little wiring bracket here, so if you want to use that, it's just 2 bolts that hold it in place on either side of the base plate. I decided to put it on now because I feel like once we get the bumper back in position, it might be kind of difficult to access those, but at this point, we'll take our bumper, get it lined back up, and then this is just going to get re-secured with our factory hardware. Was able to get the bumper reinstalled, torque the bolts down, plug the fog lights back in, things like that. Something that I did run into, really the only issue I had, was since we had this bolted up here, the bumper wouldn't go completely back on because it was getting hung up on the head of those bolts. So I did have to remove this. So that's something you're running into, something to check out. My thought is, once we reinstall our underbody panel here, you can probably just mount this up somewhere in the middle. You got the bottom of the bumper beam you can drill into to do that. So as far as this goes, there's a diagram of instructions you can use. And I also just like to kind of hold this up and roughly get it into position and make some marks where I think we need to cut. And what I usually tend to do is kind of start on the smaller side, you know, cut as little material as possible, see if it fits. If you need to take out a little bit more, we can do that, right? You can't add material, but you can always remove it. So made our marks here, and I like to use a multi-tool to cut this plastic. It's pretty thick, but you know, a Dremel or a jigsaw work just fine too, whatever you got. I got the underbody panel all trimmed out and everything, got it to fit back into position, and I think it turned out pretty good actually for the amount of cutting that we have to do. Just to give you something to work off of, in our case, this little area here where I had to trim, I cut roughly 3 inches down and roughly 3 inches across. Same thing with this one, about 3 inches down and about 6 inches. And I kind of left a little bit of material here about halfway through, you know, because really no need to cut any more off this little area. And same exact deal with this one here. Granted, I did have to make it a little bit wider, so it's about 6.5 inches and about 3.5 inches to clear this little tab part here. So got that up, re-secured. And to touch base on the bracket too, in case you're wondering, I was able to get this to work. Was able to get a bolt in from the top down, super tight, but was able to kind of work it in there, and you know, just used a flange nut there, which probably would have been good, but I wanted to make it really secure. And so for this one, I took a bolt that is self-threading, probably about a 1/2 inch in length, and ran it up through the bracket, and it threaded itself into the pre-drilled hole in our safety chain arm there. So that's how I was able to secure that, really solid, not going to go anywhere. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the etrailer.com base plate kit with the removable arms on our 2016 Jeep Wrangler.